I woke up bald on Christmas morning. My son's fiancée left a note on my nightstand that read, "Now you finally look the way you should, you pathetic old fool." Thank God she did it today, on the very day I was about to transfer $125 million of the inheritance to them. At the Christmas toast, I revealed something they never saw coming. Stay with me until the end, and tell me from which city you're watching. I opened my eyes, feeling something strange on the back of my head. I reached up, expecting to feel my hair, but my fingers touched cold skin. I sat up fast. My heart kicked against my ribs. I ran to the mirror and stopped. My hair was gone, completely gone. Not one strand left. It looked like someone had shaved my head while I slept. I held the edge of the sink to steady myself. The shock was loud, but my mind was already moving. I looked back toward the nightstand. The note was sitting there like it had been waiting for me. I picked it up. The handwriting was clean and firm. Lydia's handwriting. I read the sentence again and again. My scalp burned, but I didn't cry. My anger didn't explode. It tightened, sharp and controlled, right in the center of my chest. That woman had walked into my house, into my life, and into my son's future like she owned all of it. And now she had crossed a line she didn't understand. I looked at my reflection. A bald woman staring back. A woman someone tried to humiliate. A woman they thought would hide. I kept my eyes on the mirror. I forced myself not to look away. My silver hair had been part of me for 65 years. Thick, soft, something Henry used to touch when he stood behind me in the kitchen. Something Ethan braided when he was small. Now it was gone. Not by illness, not by accident, by intention. I pressed my hand to my scalp. The skin was tender. My reflection looked older, harsher. But underneath all of that, something else moved. Clarity. I turned to the calendar pinned on the wall. December 25, the day everything was supposed to change, the day I planned to transfer $125 million to Ethan and Lydia, my gift, my legacy, my attempt to secure their future long after I was gone. I felt the humiliation settle, heavy but clean. Lydia believed shaving my head would break something inside me. She believed I would stay home, too embarrassed to show my face. She believed I would be too hurt to think straight. She believed wrong. That note didn't weaken me. It woke me up. I walked back to the bedroom and opened the drawer where I kept Henry's watch. I touched the cold metal. "If you were here," I whispered, "you'd tell me to stand up." I straightened. I closed the drawer. The decision came fast and solid. I would not miss that Christmas dinner. And I would not hand over $125 million to a woman who thought humiliation was a sport. I opened my closet and pulled out the navy dress I had chosen for the dinner. I laid it on the bed. My hands were steady. I grabbed my phone and dialed Clara. She answered half asleep. "Nora, is everything okay?" "I need you here," I told her. "Bring the best wig you have." Clara's tone sharpened. "I'll be there." "Good," I said. I ended the call. I walked through the hallway toward the living room. The Christmas lights were still on, blinking softly against the windows. I didn't feel comfort from them. I felt focus. I picked up the note again and read it one last time. It didn't sting anymore. It didn't shake me. It told me everything I needed to know about the woman my son planned to marry. I folded it once, clean and tight, and placed it inside my coat pocket. I wanted it close. I wanted a reminder of the exact moment I stopped being blind. I took one last look at the mirror above the couch. My bald head reflected the lights behind me. I didn't look defeated. I looked awake. Christmas morning had started with humiliation. It would not end that way. I stood in front of the mirror and watched the Christmas lights behind me blur against the glass. My bald head caught their reflection like a warning signal. It wasn't just the hair that was gone. It was something deeper, something I had spent years pretending I didn't need to protect. I touched the smooth skin again, cold, bare, honest. My face looked calmer now, but the silence inside me carried weight. Not panic, Not shame, just a quiet understanding that humiliation only works on people who don't know where they come from. And I knew exactly where I came from. I also knew what I had survived. My eyes drifted to the framed photo of Henry on the dresser. His smile was steady, the kind that never rushed, the kind that told me everything would be fine even when it wasn't. I remembered the night he collapsed in our kitchen. One second he was laughing at something Ethan had said. The next second he was on the floor, his hand gripping my arm before slipping away. The doctors called it sudden. They used words like instant and unavoidable. All I heard was final. I left the hospital with a 12-year-old boy holding my coat and asking if Dad was playing a joke. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I held him all night and listened to the sound of his breathing because one of us had to stay alive. The next morning, our world changed. Bills, investments, contracts, everything Henry once handled fell on my shoulders. I didn't have a choice. I woke up before dawn and read through every file in his old office until my eyes stung. I learned numbers by breaking them. I learned strategy by failing. I learned to negotiate by making mistakes that cost more than we had. I worked from 5 in the morning until late at night, often eating standing up because sitting down felt too slow. And through all of it, I made sure Ethan never saw the fear in my face. He was a child. He deserved a childhood. I carried the weight so he wouldn't have to. I remembered the early years of Marston Holdings, the nights when the heater broke and I finished contracts under a blanket, the mornings when I walked into meetings pretending I wasn't terrified. I remembered drinking bad coffee in the car outside a bank, praying they would approve a loan that would keep us afloat. I remembered calling clients with a voice sharper than I felt inside. Every inch of growth cost something. But little by little, the company rose. First small deals, then bigger ones. Then the first year we cleared enough profit that I didn't have to check my bank balance before buying groceries. That was the year Ethan told me he wanted a gaming computer for Christmas. I bought it without blinking. Watching his face light up made every sacrifice worth it. I tightened my grip on the bathroom counter. I had built an empire from nothing. I had turned fear into discipline. I had learned every rule of the financial world because I refused to raise my son in instability. And in the end, the stability I created became so natural to him that he didn't know life without it. I thought giving him comfort was love. I didn't realize comfort can also become blindness. When Ethan left for college, he walked into his new life like he had earned all of it. The cars, the trips, the expensive tastes, he treated them as parts of a life he was entitled to. Not once did he ask how hard it had been to get here. Not once did he ask about the nights I stayed awake worrying about tuition, or whether the company would survive another year. He just assumed everything would always be provided. By me, without question. I closed my eyes and let the memory settle, the empty chairs at the dinner table. The way Ethan's voice changed after he met Lydia, lighter when he spoke to her, sharper when he spoke to me. The space he created between us wasn't loud. It was quiet, like a page turning without warning. Lydia encouraged the distance. Small comments at first. Soft, polite, perfectly measured. Maybe your mother needs more rest. Maybe she'd be happier somewhere with less responsibility. Maybe you two should have your own space. Always spoken gently, always delivered with a smile, always cutting something inside me. I looked at the mirror again. The Christmas lights flickered across the bare skin of my scalp. For a moment, the reflection of the lights looked like stars scattered across a cold sky. I straightened my posture. I wasn't looking at a woman who had lost her dignity. I was looking at a woman who had given everything she had and received distance in return. The truth was simple. I had built Marston Holdings so my son would never feel fear. I never thought he'd use it against me. That sentence echoed in my head, steady and painful. I carried Ethan through every difficulty, and somewhere along the way, he forgot what strength looked like. He forgot who held him together. And in that forgetting, he made room for someone like Lydia to rewrite the story. I turned away from the mirror and stepped into the hallway. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that follows years of giving and years of being taken for granted. I looked toward the dining room, the long table, the chairs. the empty plates from last night's dinner. It all felt distant, like a life built on a story that had ended without warning. I walked back into my bedroom as Clara knocked on the door. I stood still for one more breath. The past had shown me how much I had carried. The present had shown me what I had ignored. And the morning had shown me the truth. Humiliation can only break you if you stay in the past. I opened the door for Clara. "Let's get started," I told her, because the woman in the mirror wasn't broken. She was waking up. I remember the night clearly. 6 months before the Christmas morning, I woke up bald. 6 months before the note. 6 months before everything snapped into focus. It was a quiet Christmas Eve dinner, the kind that should have felt warm, the kind that should have felt like family. But the room had a chill that didn't come from the winter outside. It came from the two people sitting across from me, my son, Ethan, and the woman who would soon become his fiancée, Lydia Kane. The table was set the way Henry used to like it. Silverware aligned perfectly, candles lit low, the good china polished. I tried to keep that tradition, even though the house hadn't felt truly full in years. I sat at the head of the table. Lydia sat where she always sat, just close enough to pretend respect, just far enough to hide her disdain. Ethan sat between us, carving the roast as if the silence didn't weigh anything. I remember the moment Lydia looked at me, soft smile, head tilted slightly, eyes scanning me the way someone scans a receipt to make sure everything is correct. She took a slow sip of wine before placing the glass down with a gentle tap. "Maybe it's time you moved somewhere smaller, Nora. Something more appropriate for your age." No anger, no hesitation. Just a casual suggestion slipped under the table like a knife. I didn't answer right away. I cut into my meat slowly, listening for Ethan's voice, waiting for him to laugh it off, offer some kind of defense. Something. Anything. He didn't. He kept eating as if I hadn't heard her, as if the house I had worked my whole life to build was suddenly too big for me because Lydia had decided it was. She continued smiling. "I just worry about you. A large place can be so overwhelming for someone older, overwhelming, appropriate." Her words were wrapped in silk but designed to bruise. I placed my fork down, not forcefully, not dramatically, just enough for the sound to break the silence. I looked at her face, the polite expression, the perfect hair, the dress that probably cost more than most people's rent. She looked like someone who believed the world was hers as long as she said please and thank you. I answered simply, "This is my home, Lydia." A flicker of annoyance crossed her eyes, but she hid it quickly. She leaned closer to Ethan. "I just think you two deserve a space that feels like yours." Ethan didn't look up. He cut his meat, chewed, swallowed. "She's trying to help, Mom." A small sentence, but it carried weight. It pressed down on me like an unexpected hand on my shoulder. I looked at my son, my only child, the boy who used to run down these hallways with socks too big for his feet, the boy who used to sleep on my chest the year Henry died because he was afraid I'd disappear too. Now he couldn't even look at me. I took a breath and reminded myself, strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet choice not to let someone see you break. So I smiled, a small, steady smile, the kind that comes from years of holding a family together alone. "Thank you, Lydia. I'll think about it." She beamed like she had won a prize. Ethan poured her more wine. Neither of them noticed my hand under the table tightening around the napkin. Dinner continued with small talk, wedding plans, venue options, guest lists. I nodded at all the right moments. I tasted nothing. I heard everything. Every comment Lydia made chipped away at the idea of family. Every silence from Ethan confirmed what I had refused to see. By dessert, Lydia leaned back and said, "Ethan's mother bought them a condo as a wedding gift. Maybe we can do something similar, a fresh start." Ethan looked up for the first time, not at me, at her. That would be nice. Nice, as if gifts that size were normal, as if the sacrifices that built this house were background noise. as if the woman sitting at the head of the table wasn't the person who had carried him through every difficulty he couldn't remember. I looked at the two of them, their private smiles, their shared glances, their quiet agreement that I was too old, too much, too in the way. That was the moment something in me shifted. Not anger, not resentment, clarity. I cut another piece of cake, placed it on my plate, and ate it slowly. Calm, controlled, unshaken on the surface. Inside, I had made a decision. If they wanted me small, quiet, and out of the way, I would show them what it looked like when I stopped protecting them. But they didn't see it. They didn't notice anything. Ethan poured himself more wine and said, "Thanks for dinner, Mom. It means a lot." I nodded. Of course. My tone was even, my hands steady, my heart silent. They stood to leave. Lydia hugged me lightly, her cheek barely touching mine. "We'll talk more about the house later," she whispered. I smiled. And that was the night I understood something important. Sometimes the first insult isn't the one that breaks you. It's the one that wakes you. Clara arrived 20 minutes after I called her. She didn't ask questions when she stepped inside the estate and saw my face. She didn't need to. Her eyes went straight to my head. Not a flinch, not a gasp, just a slow inhale, the kind a real friend takes when she understands something terrible has happened and you're holding yourself together by discipline alone. She walked toward me with a large black case in her hands. "Show me the note," she whispered. I handed it to her without a word. She read it once, then again. Her jaw tightened, and for a moment, I saw anger spark in her expression. Real anger. Not the quiet kind I'd trained myself to live with, the kind that defends. I stood still, waiting for the wave of shame to rise, but it didn't. Maybe it had burned out earlier. Maybe humiliation has limits. Or maybe that morning had stripped everything unnecessary from me, leaving only clarity. Clara opened her case and laid out 3 wigs on the table. Short, medium, elegant long waves, all expensive, all flawless. She rested her hand on the longest one. "This one," she said. I nodded. She fitted the wig over my bare scalp with slow, careful movements, her fingers gentle but sure. She adjusted the lace, smoothed the strands, and stepped back. I lifted my chin and looked into the mirror. The reflection staring back at me wasn't the broken woman Lydia wanted to create. The wig wasn't just hair. It was armor. It softened nothing. It exposed everything. My eyes were sharp, steady, calculating. Clara touched my shoulder. "You don't deserve this." "I know." Her voice softened. "You're stronger than they think." "I know that too." She waited. I could feel her watching the way my posture changed, like someone witnessing the exact second a person stops being wounded and starts being certain. I kept my gaze on the mirror. If she wanted me to hide, she miscalculated. Clara didn't smile. She understood the weight of my tone. She closed the wig case and asked quietly, "Are you still going?" "Yes." "To the dinner?" "To everything." The Christmas lights from the hallway reflected across the mirror, scattering soft colors across my new hair. The image looked composed, controlled, and ready. Clara began touching up my makeup. I let her. Normally, I disliked anyone fussing over me, but today wasn't about vanity. It was about precision, presentation, power. My phone buzzed twice on the nightstand. Ethan, Lydia. I didn't pick up. Clara's voice broke the silence. "You don't have to show up for them." "I'm not showing up for them," she paused. "Then for who?" "For myself." She held my gaze in the mirror for a moment, then nodded. She understood. The best kind of understanding is the one that doesn't need extra words. I stood. My dress was already laid out. Navy, structured, dignified. A dress I had chosen weeks ago for a celebration I thought was built on love. Now it would serve a different purpose. As I changed, Clara walked to the window. Snow drifted down the driveway in slow, soft flakes. "It's beautiful," she murmured. "Yes," I answered. "It is." I zipped the dress and stepped into the hallway. My heels clicked against the marble floor, each step steady and cold. Clara followed behind me, carrying the empty wig case. I paused at the foyer mirror one last time. The woman staring back wasn't asking for approval. She wasn't seeking peace. She wasn't waiting for anyone to love her correctly. She was ready to walk into a room full of people who thought she was predictable, fragile, generous to a fault. She was ready to tell them who she really was, without raising her voice. Clara placed my coat around my shoulders. "You look like yourself again." "No," I answered quietly. "I look like the version of myself I should have been all along." We walked to the door together. I touched the handle, feeling the cold metal against my palm. The Christmas lights outside flickered, casting long shadows across the entryway. Clara squeezed my arm. "Whatever you're planning, be careful." "I'm planning to stop being the mother they take for granted." She exhaled slowly. "Then be precise." I stepped outside. The wind lifted the ends of my hair just slightly. The wig held firmly in place. I walked to my car with the calm certainty of someone who had decided her life would no longer be shaped by other people's cruelty. When I closed the car door, the estate behind me fell silent. And for the first time that day, I felt something close to relief. Not because the pain was over, but because the woman who had woken up that morning wasn't the same woman driving away now. She was stronger, sharper, bound by truth, not fear, and she was done being underestimated. The estate was quiet when I stepped back inside. I only needed a moment to collect my coat and the small gift bag I had prepared days earlier. Something told me not to leave yet. Something subtle, a shift in the air, a feeling I had learned to trust after years of reading boardrooms and investors. I paused in the foyer. That was when I heard it. Ethan's voice drifting from the grand hall. It was low, urgent, not the tone he used with me. I moved toward the sound without rushing, my heels barely tapping the floor. The Christmas garland along the railing glowed with soft white lights as I stepped behind one of the marble columns. I didn't breathe, I didn't speak, I just listened. Ethan's voice sharpened. "Just a few more hours, Chloe, don't stress." Chloe. The name hit like a cold gust. His assistant, 25, polite smile, quick laugh. I had seen the way she looked at him during a company gala months ago. I dismissed it as youth. I dismissed a lot of things I shouldn't have. He leaned his shoulder against the pillar on the opposite side of the room, unaware that I was standing only a few feet away. "Once we get Mom's money," he said in a lower tone, "everything gets easier. You and I will figure out the rest after the holidays." My hands went cold. Chloe whispered something I couldn't hear. Ethan huffed softly. "I know it's hard hiding it, but it won't be for long." A pause, a long one. Then, "She's old, Chloe. She'll be fine. A senior home isn't cruel. It's realistic. We'll visit." My chest tightened, but my expression didn't change. I had mastered the art of appearing calm long before this. "Yeah," he continued. "The transfer, $125 million. All set. After tonight, it's ours. Just be patient." Ours. Not his, not theirs, ours. Chloe giggled quietly through the phone. Ethan smiled. A smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. Not warmth, anticipation. He added, "I'll call you after the toast. She'll sign it. She always does." That was the moment the floor tilted, not because of the betrayal, but because of how casual he was about it. As if plotting my removal from my own life was just another errand before dessert. As if my sacrifices had become so normal to him they were no longer visible. He shifted, lowering his voice. "No, she won't suspect anything. She's desperate to keep me close." Desperate. That word settled like ice at the base of my neck. I wondered if he truly believed it. I wondered if he had said it so often it had become his truth. Chloe said something again, her voice faint like a small echo. Ethan laughed. "Yeah, I know. She can be dramatic." Dramatic. A neat little word to erase decades of work, devotion, nights I spent building a life so he wouldn't feel the poverty I once knew. Dramatic. A word used by people who have never carried anything heavy. I leaned back against the marble column. My breathing was steady. My heart wasn't racing. I wasn't shaking. That surprised me. Maybe you only fall apart when you still expect something from someone, and I no longer expected anything from my son. He ended the call with a soft, "Love you too," and shoved the phone in his pocket. For a moment he just stood there, humming to himself, adjusting his tie like he was preparing for a performance. I waited until he walked away. Only then did I step out from behind the column. The winter air spilling through the cracked window brushed against my face. I looked down at the polished wood floors that had once held Ethan's baby footsteps. The memory hit me unexpectedly, his tiny hand gripping my finger at the funeral the night Henry died. The way he had said, "Don't leave too," before falling asleep in my arms. I exhaled slowly. "You already left," I murmured, my voice quiet but steady. The chandelier above me shimmered with warm lights, a perfect contrast to the cold clarity settling inside my chest. Every second of that conversation had carved a line, a definition I could no longer ignore. He had chosen his path, and now I would choose mine. I walked to the front door with calm steps. No rushing, no shaking. The house felt different now, sharper, smaller, as if it had shrunk around a truth too big to ignore. When I stepped outside, the snow had thickened. A single flake landed on my sleeve, melting instantly. I tightened my coat, walked to the car, and opened the door with precision. The betrayal didn't crush me. It refined me, and it prepared me for what I was going to do next. The bridal suite was on the second floor of the estate, tucked behind the main balcony and wrapped in garland and white roses. I hadn't planned to go anywhere near it. I only meant to grab my coat, get into my car, and drive straight to the reception to play my polite part. But after hearing Ethan's voice on the phone, after hearing what he called our plan, some instinct inside me pushed me toward the staircase. Not curiosity, not panic, precision. I walked slowly down the hallway, my heels sinking into the thick carpet. The air smelled like perfume and champagne, Lydia's version of Christmas. As I approached the bridal suite, laughter drifted through the cracked door, high-pitched, careless, too free for a woman an hour away from marriage. I stopped just outside. The door was slightly open, enough to hear, enough to understand. Lydia's voice cut through the room, smooth, confident, the tone of someone who had never worked for anything a single day in her life. "Girls, in a few months I'll officially be rich." The laughter that followed wasn't nervous, it was celebratory, like hyenas who had found an unguarded feast. I didn't move. I barely blinked. Lydia continued, lowering her voice, but not enough. "Ethan has no idea I already contacted a divorce attorney. With community property laws, half of everything becomes mine." My stomach didn't drop. My heart didn't twist. I stood there and listened with a clarity I hadn't felt since Henry was alive. One of her bridesmaids asked, amused, "And the old woman?" "Old woman." I felt the words float through the air and land on me like dust. Lydia laughed softly. "Nora will be easy to handle. She thinks being polite makes her important. I already have her wrapped around my finger." Another laugh, another clink of glasses. I waited for the words to stop being sharp. They didn't. Lydia went on, "After the money is transferred, I'll convince Ethan that Nora needs to be somewhere safe, somewhere quiet, somewhere she can't interfere." The bridesmaids murmured in agreement. One of them asked, "A retirement place?" Lydia responded without hesitation. "Exactly. She's lived long enough thinking she runs everything. Time to reset the hierarchy." Reset the hierarchy. That was the moment something inside me steadied. I thought I would feel hurt. I thought I would feel the sting of betrayal. Instead, I felt something cold settle in my bones. Not cruelty, not revenge. Truth. They weren't plotting against a helpless woman. They were plotting against someone they thought was no longer paying attention. I stepped back from the door. Slowly. Silently. Every step felt deliberate, like counting backwards before cutting a wire. The hallway stretched long in front of me, filled with portraits of Marstons from years past, men in dark suits, women in satin gowns. For the first time, I looked at them not as ancestors, but as witnesses. I whispered under my breath, "You can rest. I'll handle this." I reached the end of the hallway and paused at the window. The courtyard below was bustling. Photographers, ushers, florists rushing to finish last-minute touches. Snow drifted onto the stone path. Everything looked peaceful, almost cinematic, almost perfect. Perfect enough to hide the truth. I stepped away from the glass and walked down the stairs with the same calm I used to negotiate million-dollar contracts. My heels touched each step with measured precision. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't broken. I wasn't even angry. I was focused. When I reached the foyer, I heard Ethan calling for Lydia downstairs. His voice held none of the warmth he once used with me, just urgency. That urgency told me one thing: he needed the money more than he needed the marriage. A fitting pair. Two people who believed they were using each other. Two people who believed I was their mutual target. Two people too confident to see the danger in underestimating a woman who built everything they now wanted to own. I walked past the staircase, through the foyer, and toward the front door. The snow outside seemed brighter now, whiter, almost inviting. Before stepping out, I let out a quiet breath. My son's fiancé and his mistress were on the same side, I murmured, and none of them were on mine. For a long time, I believed that made me weak. Now I knew it made me free. I opened the door, stepped into the cold air, and let it clean the last traces of softness from my voice. The game they had started wasn't one I chose, but finishing it, that part would be mine. I sat in my car for a long moment before touching the ignition. The estate behind me glowed with warm lights and expensive decorations, but none of it mattered anymore. The truth had already split my world open. Ethan's words, Lydia's laughter, their plans, their arrogance, and now it was my turn. I placed my phone on the center console and stared at the screen. My reflection looked back at me, calm, composed, hair perfectly in place, eyes sharper than they had been in years. I took one breath, steady and slow, then tapped the name I knew by heart, Martin Cole. The call connected almost instantly. "Nora," he answered, voice steady, warm, familiar. "Are you ready for the ceremony later?" I looked through the windshield at the falling snow. "Martin, I need you to cancel the transfer." Silence. Just for a second. The kind of silence that comes when someone realizes an entire plan has shifted. "Cancel it?" His voice lowered. "Nora, are you sure?" I've never been more sure of anything. Snowflakes tapped against the glass like soft knocks. I adjusted the grip on the steering wheel. My hands were steady. My voice was even. "Put a full stop on the 125 million, effective immediately." Martin inhaled. "All right, I'll initiate the freeze and send confirmation to your private email." "But Nora..." "May I ask what happened?" "You may," I said quietly, "but I won't tell you over the phone." Another breath from his end. Slow, calculating. Martin had always been a man who understood timing. He didn't push. "Do you want me to drive over?" "No, not yet. I'll need you tomorrow morning. Bring the estate documents and the updated inheritance draft." "That sounds significant." "It is." He paused again, like he was weighing my tone, the steadiness in it, the finality. "All right, I'll clear my schedule." "Thank you." "Nora." "Yes." His voice softened. "Whatever happened, I'm on your side." "I know." We hung up. I didn't move. I sat there, letting the silence fill the car, letting the weight of my own decision settle into place. It didn't feel heavy. It felt clean. Outside, the wind pushed a wave of snow against the car door. I watched it slide down the glass in thin, crooked lines. I remembered the way Henry used to stand on the porch during storms, saying, "Snow doesn't hide things, it reveals them." He had been right. This morning had revealed everything. My son hadn't just drifted. He had abandoned the values I raised him with. Lydia hadn't just been rude. She had planned my erasure. And together, they had assumed I would hand over my life's work like a tired old woman eager to buy affection. They were wrong. I tapped my thumb against the steering wheel, the faint rhythm grounding me. I didn't feel bitterness. I didn't feel rage. What I felt was clarity, a clean, cold understanding that giving them that money would have been the final betrayal of myself. And if motherhood meant anything, it meant standing in truth, not in illusion. I looked at the estate through the rearview mirror one more time. The windows glowed like a stage set, warm on the outside, hollow on the inside. My voice came out steady. Let them play their parts, I'll play mine. Play. I shifted the car into drive. The snow-covered driveway stretched ahead of me like a blank page, and I followed it slowly, letting the engine hum beneath me. I had canceled their future. Now I was ready to reclaim my own. The moment I stepped into the reception hall, warmth washed over me. Not emotional warmth, but the artificial kind produced by chandeliers, polished silver, and forced laughter. The room glittered with gold accents and white roses, a perfect holiday scene, crafted for photographs and social appearances, a place where everything looked gentle, even when nothing was. I walked in without hesitation. My steps were measured, steady. My coat rested across my arm, my wig perfectly brushed into place. No one in that room could see the storm I carried in my pocket, my knowledge, my clarity, my decision. And that was exactly the point. The instant Ethan spotted me, he rushed forward, smiling the way politicians smile at cameras. "Mom, there you are. You look beautiful tonight." Beautiful. As if the bald head he planned to exile to a senior home wasn't still beneath the wig he was complimenting. He leaned in and kissed my cheek. His lips were warm. His intentions were cold. I held his arms lightly. "I wouldn't miss your big night." And I meant it, but not in the way he assumed. Behind him, Lydia appeared, glowing in her custom gown, her hair curled into soft waves. She moved like someone who believed the world was already hers. She wrapped her hands around Ethan's arm and stepped closer, beaming. "Nora, that dress," she said with a breathy laugh. "You look so refreshed tonight." Refreshed. A polite substitute for something crueler. I smiled back. "It's amazing what a morning can do." She didn't hear the meaning. Her mind didn't operate at that depth. Lydia took my hands in hers. "We're so glad you're here. Truly, it means the world." What she meant was, "It means the money is coming." I squeezed her fingers lightly. "Of course, dear." Her smile deepened, but her eyes didn't. Her eyes flickered around the room, tracking who was watching us. People always reveal themselves when they think they're being admired. Ethan guided me to the main table. People nodded, complimented me, praised the couple. I nodded back. My movements were smooth, effortless, a perfectly carved calm. During the first dance, guests whispered to each other in soft admiration. I stood at the edge of the room watching Ethan twirl Lydia under the lights. They looked like a fairy tale, until you listened closely enough to hear the truth beneath their voices. Lydia brushed past me between songs, pretending to fix her dress. "Thank you again for everything you're doing for us," she murmured, her tone sweet, her intentions surgical. I tilted my head. "I'm happy to give you both exactly what you deserve." She mistook my meaning. People like her always do. Later, Ethan returned with 2 champagne glasses. He handed me one, his smile practiced, his eyes scanning the room like a man preparing for a performance. "I'm glad we're all on the same page," he murmured. I raised the glass. "We will be soon." He chuckled, assuming I meant the money. He didn't notice the edge in my voice, or maybe he was too confident to hear it. Music swelled around us, violins, piano, the kind of holiday melody meant to soften the atmosphere. But beneath it, the energy in the room shifted. I felt people's eyes drift toward me. They saw poise. They saw elegance. They saw the mother of the groom. They didn't see the truth. That truth stayed just beneath my smile, sealed tight behind calm eyes. I circulated the room, greeting guests with gentle warmth. I asked about their families, their travel plans, their holiday traditions. I moved through the hall like someone hosting a peaceful evening instead of preparing a moral reckoning. Not a single crack showed, not in my voice, not in my hands, not in my composure. The calm wasn't an act, it was a choice, a strategy. Because anger is loud and loudness warns people. Calm is quiet, and quiet gets close enough to speak, close enough to cut, close enough to finish what others started. As the music shifted to a slower melody, Ethan placed his hand on my arm. "The toast is coming soon. Do you want to say something?" I smiled at him, steady and soft. "Yes," I said, "I do." He nodded, relieved, expectant, unaware. In the reflection on the window beside us, I saw the three of us standing together, Ethan smiling, Lydia glowing, and me calm as a still lake. That reflection held a truth they didn't understand. Still water is the most dangerous. It reflects everything. The orchestra softened, guests gathered, champagne glasses lifted. A hush settled over the room. I stepped toward the microphone with the same quiet grace I'd used all night. My calm mask held perfectly, but beneath it, everything was ready. The microphone felt surprisingly light in my hand. The room quieted with a kind of reverence I hadn't felt in years. Every guest turned toward me, some smiling politely, some curious, some simply waiting for their champagne. At the center table, Ethan straightened his tie. Lydia folded her hands delicately, already rehearsing the grateful smile she planned to give when I announced the transfer. I let the silence stretch, not uncomfortably, purposefully. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I began, my voice steady, warm, measured. "Seeing my son marry the woman he loves is a moment I've looked forward to for a long time." A soft ripple of approval moved through the crowd. Lydia blushed on cue. Ethan exhaled as if relieved we were following the script he expected. I continued. "When Ethan was born, I made a promise to myself and to Henry, his father, that I would give our son a life without fear. I worked for decades to keep that promise." People nodded. Some knew my story. Others only knew the outcome. Success. "I planned a special wedding gift tonight," I said. "Something significant." The room leaned in. Ethan's grip tightened on his champagne glass. Lydia's eyes widened ever so slightly. $125 million. A wave of gasps. A murmur shot across the room like electricity. Hands flew to mouths. Cameras lifted. Lydia's smile stretched, sharp as glass. Ethan's eyes flickered with triumph. I let them feel that triumph, just long enough. "But," I added gently, "I realized something today." Silence. "The greatest gift I can give isn't money." Ethan froze. Lydia's smile faltered. "It's the truth." Every whisper died instantly. I reached into my clutch and unfolded the note, slowly, deliberately. The paper crackled loud enough to echo. "This morning," I said, "I woke up bald. Someone shaved my head as I slept. They left this." I held the note up. My voice remained calm. "Now you finally look the way you should, you pathetic old fool." The room erupted. Gasps, shock, someone swearing under their breath. Lydia blinked hard, her face draining of color, then flushing red. "I want to be clear," I continued. "Losing my hair didn't break me, but it did reveal something I had refused to see." I stepped away from the table, walking slowly through the room like someone laying out evidence in a quiet courtroom. "This morning I overheard my son," I said without turning. "He was on the phone. He wasn't speaking to his bride." A ripple of whispers. "He was speaking to Chloe." A louder ripple. "His mistress!" The room cracked open in shock. Lydia's head whipped toward Ethan, her jaw rigid. Ethan stood abruptly, knocking over his glass, but his voice caught in his throat. I kept walking. "He told her that once he received my inheritance money, he'd start a new life with her. He discussed a timeline. He discussed moving me into a facility so I wouldn't interfere." Guests covered their mouths. Phones lifted discreetly. Someone gasped loud enough to echo. Ethan stepped forward. "Mom, that's not—" I raised one hand. He froze. "I also overheard Lydia," I said, turning toward her. discussing her plan with her friends. She had already contacted a divorce attorney. She said, and I quote, "With community property laws, half of everything becomes mine." Lydia shot to her feet. "This is insane. You're twisting—" I cut her off gently. "You also said you'd convince Ethan to place me in a home. You said I'd be easy to handle." Dead silence. I let my eyes move across the room. "I didn't follow you. I didn't ask for these truths. They came to me." Lydia's mask cracked. Her hands shook. Ethan stared at me, cheeks pale, lips trembling. I stepped toward them. For 33 years, I worked day and night to give my son a life without fear. I sacrificed friendships, time, and parts of myself I can never get back. And today, I learned exactly how much that meant. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. I was the calmest person in the room. Nothing. Several guests lowered their heads. Others stared at Ethan with disgust. He took a step toward me. "Mom, please, let me explain. I didn't mean—" "Stop," I said softly. Every word I heard this morning was clear, every intention unmistakable. I turned to the crowd. "And since tonight is meant for declarations, here is mine." I faced Ethan and Lydia fully. That $125 million I planned to transfer today? My pause was surgical. It was canceled this morning. The room exploded, shouts, gasps, people standing. Someone in the back whispered, "Good for her." Lydia's face contorted into something raw, something unmasked. Ethan's mouth fell open as his entire future collapsed in front of him. I stepped back, allowing the noise to fade into a low roar. "Build your lives," I said softly, "but build them without me." Then I placed the microphone back on the stand. I didn't wait for responses. I didn't need them. I turned, lifted my chin, and walked toward the exit as the entire room watched in stunned silence. The last sound I heard behind me was Lydia screaming my son's name. The second sound was Ethan begging her not to leave. Neither sound stopped me. I pushed open the hall doors, and the cold met me instantly, clean, sharp, honest. Behind me, the reception dissolved into chaos. Raised voices, the scrape of chairs, the metallic crash of a champagne flute hitting the floor. None of it touched me. None of it belonged to me anymore. I stepped out into the falling snow, letting the quiet swallow every sound that tried to follow. The air smelled like winter and freedom. For a moment I stood on the stone steps, breathing steadily. My hands were loose at my sides. My heart wasn't racing. My thoughts weren't tangled. Everything inside me felt still. The kind of stillness you only earn after walking through something that should have broken you, but somehow refined you instead. I whispered, not bitterly, not triumphantly, just truthfully, "Merry Christmas. To me." The snow gathered on the front walkway as I descended each step with the kind of calm people mistake for surrender. It wasn't surrender. It was release. The kind of release that comes when you stop fighting to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you. At the base of the steps, the valet hurried toward me, flustered. "Mrs. Marston, do you need—" "I'm fine," I said, gently but firmly. He stopped. Something in my tone settled him immediately. The car door opened with a soft click. I slid inside, shutting out the last bits of noise seeping through the doorway. As I pulled off my gloves, I saw my reflection in the side window. Snowflakes drifting across the glass, the lights from the hall glowing faintly behind me. I reached up and removed the wig. Slowly, deliberately. The cool air brushed across my bare scalp. I didn't look away from my reflection. The woman staring back wasn't humiliated. She wasn't weakened. She wasn't wounded. She looked free. "My bald head wasn't shame," I murmured softly. It was rebirth. I placed the wig on the passenger seat. Not discarded, just no longer needed. The simplicity of that act, the honesty of it, felt more powerful than anything I'd said inside. My phone lit up. Ethan. Then again. Lydia. Unknown numbers. A string of messages filling the screen. I turned the phone face down. Some silences are necessary. I started the engine. The headlights cut through the swirling snow, illuminating the long stretch of driveway ahead. The estate behind me faded into shadows and Christmas lights. A place I had built from nothing. A place I had held together alone. A place that no longer held me hostage. As I drove away, the noise from the reception disappeared entirely, replaced by the soft hum of the engine and the quiet, steady rhythm of my breath. No shaking, no doubt, no second-guessing, just the clean, uncluttered silence that follows truth. When I reached my home, I parked in the driveway and stepped out. The snow was falling heavier now, white, steady, cleansing. I walked inside, turned on a single lamp, and let the warmth settle over the dark room. The house felt different tonight. Not empty, not lonely. Mine, completely, unequivocally mine. I hung my coat, placed the wig on the counter, and stood a moment longer in the quiet. I felt the faintest smile tug at the corner of my mouth. Not joy, not satisfaction, peace. The kind you don't announce, the kind you don't explain, the kind you simply live. Tomorrow, there would be paperwork, decisions, closure. Tonight, there was silence. And for the first time in years, silence felt safe. Morning arrived quietly, the way healing always does, slow, steady, without announcement. Snow still lined the driveway when Martin's car pulled up. He stepped out with a thick folder under his arm, his coat dusted white at the shoulders. When I opened the door, he paused long enough to search my face, to make sure the calm he heard in my voice yesterday hadn't been forced. "It's good to see you, Nora," he said gently. "Come in," I answered. "We have work to do." We sat in the study, the room Henry once used for budget drafts and investment notes. It smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. Martin laid out the documents with the precision of a man who understood the gravity of every signed line. "The transfer is officially canceled," he confirmed, "frozen permanently. They cannot access a penny." I nodded. "Good." He adjusted his glasses. "You mentioned wanting changes to the will." "Yes, major changes." He unfolded a clean draft. "Tell me what you want." I looked toward the window, where the morning light touched the snow in soft curves. "Everything goes to the Widow's Bridge Foundation, the full estate." Martin blinked. He expected a reduction, not a clean sweep. "Nora, none of it to Ethan?" "No." He hesitated. "Even a symbolic amount?" "No," I repeated. "Symbols only work on people who value meaning. My son values money, so he gets neither." Martin leaned back, studying me, not judging, not questioning, understanding. "All right," he said quietly. "Then that's what we'll do." I signed the papers one by one. My signature was firm, straight, clean. Every stroke felt like a closing door, not slammed in anger, but gently, finally, correctly. When we finished, Martin gathered the documents. "Do you want to tell him yourself?" "No," I replied. "He'll figure it out." He gave a small nod. "I'll file everything by tomorrow." We walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the knob. "You know," he said softly, "what you did last night took more strength than most people have." "It wasn't strength," I said. "It was clarity." After he left, the house returned to its quiet rhythm. I made myself tea and sat in the room that overlooked the backyard. Snow covered the garden like a blank page. Then I heard it, knocking, desperate, fast. I didn't rush. I set my cup down and walked to the door with the same calm I used the night before. It was Lydia. Her mascara streaked, her hair half undone, eyes swollen from crying. "Nora, please." Her breath hitched. "Please just listen." I opened the door halfway. Nothing more. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean any of it. I was stressed. I was stupid. I thought things would be different. Please, I need another chance." Her tears fell fast, dramatic, heavy. But her eyes, those eyes, still searched the hall behind me, still calculating who might be watching. "I want a real relationship," she said. "With you, with Ethan. I want us to fix this." I held her gaze for 3 seconds. That was all she earned. "Your education," I said evenly, "is no longer my responsibility." Her lips parted, but no words came. I closed the door before she forced any out. Minutes later, a car pulled up. More knocking. Ethan. He looked smaller than the boy I raised, shoulders hunched, eyes red, a man suddenly aware that the ground beneath him wasn't solid at all. "Mom," his voice cracked, "please, I know I failed you. I know I hurt you. Just give me a chance to make it right." I kept the door between us, my hand on the edge. "You made choices," I said softly. "Now live with them." He swallowed hard. "But I'm your son." "You were," I answered. "For 33 years, I gave you everything I had. Now it's your turn to be an adult." He reached for the door, but I stepped back, away from his hand. "Nora, please," he whispered. But the truth was simple. Love without boundaries becomes self-destruction. And I had destroyed enough pieces of myself already. I closed the door. The sound was soft, final, honest. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel guilt. I felt peace. Weeks passed quietly. The story of the wedding meltdown spread across town, across social media, across every circle that once praised Ethan and Lydia. Invitations dried up. Partnerships backed out. Their carefully built illusions collapsed. 6 months later, I heard they divorced. Lydia moved back with her parents, searching for a job for the first time in her life. Ethan tried to salvage his reputation, but without the promise of my inheritance, people lost interest quickly. His relationship with Chloe ended within weeks. She vanished the moment she realized there was no fortune coming her way. From a distance, I watched their worlds shrink, not with spite, not with pleasure, with acceptance. They were living the consequences they had designed. My world, meanwhile, began to grow. I cooked for myself again. I slept peacefully. I worked with the Widows' Charity, helping women who reminded me of the younger version of me, the one who built an empire with nothing but willpower and a child on her hip. Every day felt like clearing a room I had been afraid to enter, and the more I cleared, the lighter everything became. Tomorrow, I would sign the final set of documents transferring my estate permanently. Tonight, I rested in the quiet, a quiet I had earned. 2 years later, my mornings no longer began with tension. No footsteps in the hallway, no voices rising behind closed doors, no invisible weight sitting on my chest before I opened my eyes. I woke to the sound of waves instead, steady, predictable, honest. The small coastal house I'd bought after selling the estate sat close enough to the water for the sea breeze to brush through the open windows every dawn. I wrapped my hands around a warm mug of coffee and stepped onto the terrace. The horizon glowed pale gold, stretching across the quiet coastline. This was the kind of morning I had always imagined having, someday, back when life was nothing but responsibilities stacked on top of each other. It took 67 years, and the collapse of everything I thought was permanent, but someday had finally arrived. Inside, my studio smelled of oil paint and fresh paper. Canvas after canvas leaned against the wall, sunsets, fields, portraits of the life I never had time to study before. I set the mug down and walked to the largest painting, adding a thin stroke of white to the crest of a wave. The motion was smooth, unhurried, the kind of gesture you make when your life no longer depends on pleasing anyone. Clara visited often. She knocked gently around 10, carrying pastries from the bakery she loved. Today was no different. She slipped inside with a warm smile. "You're already painting." "I should have known." I handed her a plate. "You should consider moving to the coast." "Oh, I will," she replied, settling into the chair near the window. "But not before you finish that seascape you promised to give the charity auction." She glanced at me, curious, grateful, proud. She saw the changes in me more clearly than anyone. The woman I used to be lived her life in service of others, constantly giving until she had nothing left. The woman standing here now understood balance, understood boundaries, understood that peace wasn't a reward. It was a choice. Later that afternoon, I walked to the small cafe near the pier. Robert Langley was already there, seated at the table closest to the railing. A simple man, a widower, someone who understood the quiet parts of loss without needing them, explained. He lifted his cup in greeting. "I thought you might enjoy this view today," he said. "I always do," I answered, taking the seat across from him. Our friendship grew without pressure, without expectations, just two people who had lived enough to appreciate stillness. We talked about simple things, travel, books, the stubbornness of tomato plants. Not once did he ask about my past unless I offered it. That alone made him easy to be around. He glanced at my hair as the wind brushed through it. "It's grown back beautifully," he said. I touched the strands gently. They were soft, silver, honest. "It feels good to wear it as it is." "It suits you," he said. Not a compliment about beauty, a compliment about truth. That evening, after returning home, I stood in front of the mirror, the same kind of mirror that once reflected humiliation. Tonight, it reflected something different. My hair had grown in fully, white, bright, unapologetic. My face looked older, yes, but stronger, clearer, at peace. I remembered the note Lydia left on my nightstand the morning she thought she won. I remembered Ethan's voice whispering plans to send me away. I remembered how small they expected me to feel, how helpless, how easy to control. And yet here I stood, untouched by their intentions, untouched by their downfall, untouched by their absence. They were no longer the center of my story. I was. I rested my hands on the counter and breathed in slowly. "Motherly love isn't letting them use you," I whispered. "It's loving enough to draw the line." The room felt warm, safe, mine. Outside, the tide rolled in and out with steady rhythm. I closed the curtains and walked toward the terrace, where the evening breeze carried the scent of salt and pine. This simple, quiet life, was the future I built for myself. Not a future bought with sacrifice, not a future dictated by someone else's expectations, a future earned. And when I finally sat down, watching the sky fade into soft lavender tones, I realized something I never thought I'd reach. I wasn't healing anymore. I wasn't healing. I was whole. That's how my story unfolded. Not with noise, not with revenge shouted across a room, but with quiet choices that rebuilt my life piece by piece. And if you've stayed with me until this moment, thank you. It means more than you know. If my story reminded you of someone you love or someone you had to walk away from, feel free to share your thoughts below. I always read your comments. They make this place feel a little warmer. And if you'd like to hear more stories like mine, stories of strength, survival, and quiet justice, you're welcome to stay with our Grandma Life Stories family. Thank you for spending your time with me today. I'll see you in the next video. Take care of yourself. Truly. The end.